teaching with simulations. I thought I would let me start by saying what I mean by simulations. I mean anything that forces students to take on the position of somebody else and make a decision or try to understand why that person has made a decision, made the decision that they did. So I thought we would start by doing at least the first part of the simulation, a crisis simulation that I've designed to do with high school students. I have not actually been able to test it with high school students, but we've tested it with various student groups. So we need 3 teams. So can we do you 2, you 3 in the back, and Shannon and Scott?
Thanks, Amy.
So this is a simulation where you will be representing either the Government of Canada Operations Centre, the province of Quebec, or the United States government. And the simulation begins, I'm a political scientist, I teach international relations. The simulation begins with a terrorist attack. So, you guys can be Quebec. Whoops, sorry. So the first thing, this is actually set up to take about half an hour, but I'm pretty confident you guys can go a bit faster than that. So the first thing, you're small groups, so I'm not going to ask you to designate a chairperson. But I'd like to start the simulation by letting you know that there has been a hijacking at the Montreal airport on the tarmac. And the first document that you have in front of you after the introduction, which you can read through, is the 911 call that was received at the Montreal 911 Centre. So you can read that, read the introduction, and then you'll have a series of decisions to make. You should send your decisions to me by about 20 after.
Okay. Yeah,
Okay, so at the end of session 1, the following things have occurred. All flights in and out of the United States have been grounded. First responders have been ordered to the Montreal airport. And now that the first responders are in place, the first responders are in the process of evacuating the airport. So you have part 2, and we'll play through part 2. I'm not sure if we'll get to part 3, but let's say 5 minutes for this part. I'm making you go a little faster than I would normally. You can share, yeah. But I'm actually going to stop there. I know we're sort of stopping in the middle of everything. This simulation goes on. There's a formula for if you have a tactical intervention, there's a formula for determining success. There are actually 4 terrorists on board the airplane that you guys have not yet found. If you had loaded out... Yeah. If you guys had loaded out surveillance equipment, you would have found the other 2 terrorists. And then it actually goes out into a couple more sessions. One involves some false information because people start to get really itchy because there's a terrorist attack going on, and so they start asking for intelligence briefings. And some of them are, just guys with trucks driving around places. And then it ends with a PR exercise where each of the governments has to talk to the public about the success or failure of the mission. So I wanted to just give you an example of what we can do. This is actually a simulation that I worked with a student to write. So you've actually, as we've done this is about the 4th time we've done it. We identify new things every time. Like obviously I have to define inset and make sure that you know that tactical intervention is done by an inset. I would have given you, and normally I would have given you a bit more time at the beginning to sort of ask questions about how it works and all that kind of thing, but I wanted to sort of get through it. So I want to talk about four kinds of simulations quickly. Reasons I like simulations in the classroom, and then a few things that I've learned by experience to make simulations work better, and then hopefully we can have some discussion. So this is obviously an example of a crisis simulation where you give students a role and a goal. So your role provides security for diplomats attending the goal provides security for diplomats attending the G20 meeting. Whatever the goal is, and then they have particular rules. In a more complicated version of this simulation we actually assigned each member of the team a different role. We've really simplified this one down, and it works better that way. The second kind of simulation that I've done in the classroom are negotiation simulations. And these can be things like a prisoner's dilemma simulation, where you teach students about the prisoner's dilemma, have them give them a scenario that forces them to enact the prisoner's dilemma, iterate the prisoner's dilemma. I do it through an oil game simulation where they have to decide what price they're going to charge their opponent for oil. And then at certain points in the game, they get opportunities to negotiate. And we use it as a way to talk about what facilitates and what hinders cooperation in international politics. I've done a preparatory conference for human rights agenda. Students have roles corresponding to states that give them conflicting interests about the kinds of things they would like to discuss at a human rights conference, and then they have to agree on setting the agenda. I've done sort of humanitarian intervention simulations, treaty negotiations, that kind of thing. You can very often find these already written for you. That's the easiest way to do it. Check the active learning section of your professional organization. The International Studies Association has a ton of resources. The US Institute for Peace has a bunch, and you can modify them if you're not teaching global politics. You might be able to modify them to meet whatever goals you need to meet. The Pew cases in global politics, they run case studies, but several of those are also simulations. The third kind is one that I've participated in, I haven't tried, but would really like to, is the idea of a staff ride. So the idea of a staff ride comes actually from the Prussian military in the 18th century, but it was adopted by the American military after the Vietnam War. And it's a tactical training tool for usually officers, where you go to a battlefield. So I've done them for Revolutionary War battlefields. And you're given a role, and you stand out on the battlefield, and you're general, whomever, and you have to explain what your pathway for getting logistics to the battlefield was, why you chose to do that. And each person does the research on their own role, and each person enacts the role, spends 5 or 10 minutes explaining, given a set of guiding questions, why they made the decisions they made. And then by the end, you sort of have a better picture of why the battle occurred the way it did. I could see doing this for like a natural disaster, a political disaster, any kind of political decision where you really want to get an intersection between the space and the decision. So on a battlefield, obviously the space matters. Like it matters, you can stand up on a hill and understand why that was where they put their encampment even 200 years later. And it really adds a lot to the experience. And the fourth is just the idea of a case study. So giving students a scenario, fictional or real, and stopping it at a key decision point. What would you do? Would you introduce more American forces into Vietnam in 1965? Or would you choose not to escalate? What influences your decision? Would you use drones in this context? Would you not use drones in this context? And you can start a class discussion that way by forcing students to take on somebody else's role. I really like doing simulations in classrooms, most obviously, and this is what you see in all of the literature, because it forces students to apply their knowledge and in a way that they remember. And we've all read the stuff that talks about how active learning helps with concept retention. Pretty sure anyone who comes to teaching seminars is convinced already on that point. But other reasons that I really like running simulations are that they're great icebreakers. They force students to interact with each other. It works really well at the beginning of a session. I do one at the beginning of my senior security studies seminar, where they have to define what it means to be secure, and then halfway through I give them a scenario of a fictional country, and they have to think about how their view of what it means to be secure would change now that they know sort of what their identity as a state is. I really like doing it in seminars at the beginning of the semester because it sets the tone that the seminar is not going to be me talking to them, and that it's going to be them talking to each other. And I find a simulation is a really good way of doing that. The other reason I like it is that it duplicates the real world Not in the sense that the decision-making procedure is the same. As I said, we had to simplify the Montreal crisis simulation because it just gets too complicated if you try to really duplicate all of the ways that people actually make decisions. But it duplicates it because it introduces emotion into the classroom. Students feel really betrayed when they make a negotiation about the price of something and then the other person goes against it and sells their oil for less. You know, they feel nationalism, they feel really proud of themselves when they get their interests fulfilled on a treaty. And I really like introducing emotion into the classroom that way because I think very often it's removed from our lectures. It forces them to make decisions without all the information, which is what happens in real life. I ran a simulation, a police simulation where they were supposed to be providing security to a G20 meeting. They'd arrested a young woman who had no identification on her and was telling them that she was 19. Meanwhile, they had a call from Hillary Clinton who was saying that the daughter of her university friend who was 16 had been arrested. And the students were like, what do we do? Like, we don't want to be in this PR scandal where we've arrested Hillary Clinton's niece. And then they come to me and they say, you know, like, what's right? Which of this piece of information is right? And I say, well, you know, you've got to decide. You don't have all of the pieces of information. She's in front of you. She's got no ID. What are you going to do? And that's another benefit. It teaches students that sometimes there's no outside authority to appeal to. Sometimes you are the authority that has to make the decision. And you have to make that decision under pressure, and you have to make that decision without having all of the information that you'd like to have. And again, for political scientists, I think that's a really useful tool and skill for them to have. Some advice for putting together simulations. Super clear instructions to yourself. Write out the script exactly of what you're going to say. You would think after like 15 years in studying political science, I could explain the prisoner's dilemma without making a mistake. I can't. I have to like read it line by line or I will get something wrong and the simulation won't work. The more senior your students, the more advanced they are, the more you can wing it. The more junior your students are, the more guidance they need, I've discovered. You need a master binder with everything the coordinator needs. I had it organized in folders today, part 1, part 2, part 3 of the simulation. I find it helps to have like an Excel chart that tells me what my decision tree is, what I have to do. So I was giving you out, you would hand me a flight list, I was handing back an intelligence report. That's all listed on my organizing tree. Get help. Things can get super chaotic super quickly, particularly with a big group. This is a small group. I find students usually are really willing to help run these kinds of things, particularly if they've gone through it once or twice. Helpers can also be outraged citizens, journalists, disgruntled travelers. You know, whenever you need to introduce something into the simulation, like if you had grounded all of the flights in Canada, I might have asked someone to be disgruntled traveler trying to fly from Vancouver to Calgary who can't get where they're going because of something that they don't know what's going on in Montreal. Think about your space. Breakout rooms are awesome. Whether it's for negotiations or a crisis or a case study, like giving the opportunity for people to discuss in private so that they're not talking to people they're not supposed to be talking to. Name tags with the role. If people have roles, giving them name tags with a role on it works really well. We used to do the prisoner's dilemma oil negotiation on the lawn. You'd just set up like 40 pairs and they would meet in the middle to make the negotiation and they go back out to the outside. Students obviously really like the opportunity to get out of the classroom and to get outside. Think about how you're going to convey information to the group. If there's a lot of things going on, there may be information that everybody needs. I often assign a student to be the journalist, to go around and talk to people and figure out what information they're willing to tell them and to make announcements about it periodically through the simulation. Alternatively, I act as the CBC. I have my coordinator voice and I have the CBC voice or the BBC or Al Jazeera or whoever it needs to be. And I make announcements about, disgruntled travelers or the weather or, news reports, something's going on, we don't know what, waiting for news from the US government, that kind of thing. Add some intrigue. I like spies myself. Spies who are passing information to the other side, you can give them great names. You can have police. We had in the G20 simulation, the police officer was, one of the chief of police was in cahoots with the drug lords and was relaying information to the drug lords who were trying to capitalize on the chaos in the city. Intelligence reports can turn out to be misleading or paranoid. That's what happens in this game. So information that kind of sends students off on the wrong track can be fun. That said, expect your students to get it wrong. Expect them to share information they're not supposed to share. Expect them to talk to people you've told them not to talk to. Expect them to, not make decisions that they're supposed to make or vice versa. And so you sort of have to have ways up your sleeve of throwing something into the simulation to rectify that problem. Sometimes you have to be the voice of God. Have more information than you think you'll need, particularly in a crisis simulation. Negotiations are easier, honestly, because they're a bit calmer, not as many things are happening at once, and you just set up conflicts of interest in a negotiation simulation and let them go and try to solve them. In a crisis simulation, you've got to sort of keep giving them things to react to, because they'll solve one problem and you've got to give them the next problem. So sometimes you have to feed students information. Hey, Shannon, why don't you go over and ask the foreign minister what he thinks about X? Having multiple crises, multiple things going on at once is okay. Some can be big, some can be small, some can escalate if students react the way you expect them to react. Some can happen if students react in ways that are inappropriate. Like if we'd had scrambled jets in this simulation actually shoot down the plane, obviously everybody dies. That's probably not a great outcome for a small plane that's been hijacked and hasn't even left the tarmac. Although eventually it takes off. If you don't do anything, it takes off. I ran a simulation the week before there was an earthquake, a tidal wave, and a nuclear meltdown in Japan. So you can pile on the crises and sometimes still not even get close to what could be happening in real life. Silly is sometimes okay because silly is memorable. The Foreign Affairs Society here at University of Waterloo did a really successful zombie model UN a couple of years ago. I've done one where there was something introduced to Iceland's water supply that made all the men impotent. Those are both good examples of how a state would respond to a pandemic. So there's, sometimes silly is fun and it makes students get involved. Something I haven't done, but a lot of people do is take it outside the classroom. So they have a simulation that goes across more than one class period. Chat rooms, they can set up chat rooms on Learn, instant messaging, tasks that students do outside the classroom. One thing I struggle with, though, in that kind of situation is how you keep the energy up across a break. Like I've often found, even if you take a break in the middle of the simulation, you come back after lunch or coffee, and the energy's just way down. It's hard to get it back up again. Obviously, you want to debrief. You want to make sure at the end of the simulation that all of the private information comes out. You want students to have a sense of why and how their interests were conflicting. And you want to make links to them for them to class concepts. Obviously, the easiest way to do this is just in a discussion. But other things I've tried are doing a public inquiry. We had a panel of judges. Each participant or group of participants was invited to come before the panel of judges and answer a series of questions that sort of elicited the information that we wanted to come out. Once I did this where there were actual policymakers in the room responsible for the broad general thing we were doing, and they were able to jump in and add detail about how this is similar and how this is different from what happens in real life, and then you can integrate that in later. So scrambling the jets, a policymaker said to me, the first thing that would happen is the Americans would want to get jets in the air. So we added that to the simulation. I've also done it as a press conference, which sort of adds a PR element. You might ask students to give a press conference reporting on what happened without using trigger words like crisis, bad, failure, disaster, all of the things that you'd probably want, that a real spin doctor would be trying to avoid. Like, how do you put a positive spin on this disaster? And then the final thing is just to make sure you integrate it with course material. Various ways of doing that are asking students to pre-write briefing notes to guide a role. So I've done sort of Model UN or EU simulations where students write in advance on here are the things that my country most wants to get out of this simulation. Here is our strategy for negotiating. Here's who we're going to talk to first. Here's who we're going to talk to second. And that's something that you could mark then. I've turned it into exam questions. Gave all of the students all of the data, aggregated data from 40 groups who did an iterated prisoner's dilemma and said, given the data, is this class realist or liberal? According to international relations theory, why do you think that they failed at cooperating? What do you think would make them more successful at cooperating? And then it's based on actual data. Having them write a reflection paper, sort of how does the simulation help you to understand course concepts in a different way? And you can usually ferret out pretty quickly the ones who actually came to the simulation and the ones who didn't in that kind of context.